Hi, I'm Rick from CJ Pony Parts and Gotta Have It Builds. Today we have an Eibach Pro-Street-S coilover system that we're going to be putting on our 2013 Mustang GT Gotta Have It Street. The Pro-Street-S coilover system includes new front struts, coil springs, adjuster sleeves. For the rear, it's got a new set of shocks, coil springs, height adjustable sleeves that are going to go on the rear axle, bump stops, and tools that are going to allow us to adjust the actual coilovers while they're on the car. The Pro-Street-S system has been designed to greatly improve handling without sacrificing ride quality.
To start the installation of the Eibach coilover system, you want to get the car in the air and remove the front and rear wheels. We're going to start in the front first, and we're going to disconnect the sway bar end links from the strut. And then we're also going to disconnect the ABS wire. Next, you're going to want to remove the 4 bolts that hold the strut assembly to the top of the shock tower. With that out of the way, it allows the strut and spindle to drop down a little bit so you can get to the 2 spindle nuts that hold the spindle to the strut. The spindle bolts are splined, so once you remove the nut, you can tap the spindle bolts out. With the strut assembly out of the car, we put coil spring compressors on the coil springs and tighten them down so that we could remove the top strut mount. Transfer over your strut mount to the top of the new assembly. In this case, we used Maximum Motorsports caster camber plates. Apply some pressure on the springs with the top strut mount, which will allow you to start the strut nut. Here we lowered the spring sleeve to our desired ride height at about 3/4 of an inch from the bottom. I want to make sure that both the left and the right are even. With the strut assembly back in place, we slid the spindle bolts back through and attached them with the spindle nuts. With the spindle connected, you want to put your top strut mount nuts back on and attach it to the top of the shock tower. With the strut in place, reconnect the sway bar end links. Moving on to the rear suspension, you start by removing the rear shocks. First, we removed the lower shock bolt, which allowed us to pull down on the axle to pull out the coil spring. With the axle dropped, you're easily able to put in the new coil spring with the adjuster sleeve. Eibach provides new bump stops. I'm going to remove the old bump stops with the plate that's held on with 2 bolts. Pull out the old bump stop and slide in the new bump stop. It's kind of tight, but you can get it. The shorter bump stop allows us to have more suspension travel in the rear. The top shock nut is in the trunk and it's behind the side panels. Just remove the side panels. With the top shock nut off, slide out the old shock. You're going to reuse your shock bushings and slide in your new shock. With the top nut tightened, you can go back to the bottom and put in the lower shock bolt. Once the bottom shock bolt is retightened, you may need to reattach the rear sway bar. We had the rear sway bar loose so that we could easily pull down to pull out the old spring. Now that we've completed the Eibach Pro-Street-S system, we were able to adjust the ride height exactly where we wanted it. We preferred the ride height to be even over the stock look where the rear sits just a touch higher than the front.